The desert is not silent. Beneath its endless sands, a hidden river of light now flows. Fiber optic cables, stretching more than 50,000 kilometers, lie buried across the landlocked nation of Burkina Faso. It is a feat that seems almost impossible, to turn the harsh Sahel into a digital highway. Yet, it has happened. But when the dust of construction settled, one question thundered louder than the desert winds. Who holds the power of this network? Is it the state that laid the cables? Is it the foreign contractors who built them? Or is it the unseen hands of global giants waiting to tighten their grip? This is not just a story about wires and glass. It is about sovereignty. It is about control. And it is about whether a small nation can stand tall in a world where data is power. Stay with me as we travel from the deserts of West Africa to the halls of global politics, uncovering the drama, the doubts, and the defiance. And before we begin, hit that subscribe button so you will not miss the stories of power, faith, and the struggle of nations carving their destiny. When you first look at Burkina Faso, you see a land without sea. A country surrounded by borders, cut off from the world's shipping lanes. For generations, it was spoken of as poor, isolated, and struggling to connect. But today, there is another story rising from the dust, a story of connection, ambition, and the will to rewrite destiny. It began with an audacious plan to lay more than 50,000 kilometers of fiber optic cable across the dry earth. Imagine it, my friends. A web of glass and light, stretching farther than the length of the Earth's circumference, binding towns, villages, ministries, and markets into one living bloodstream of data. Engineers arrived with bulldozers and trucks, tearing through rock, through clay, through endless horizons of sand. Every trench dug was more than a hole in the ground. It was a scar of hope, a wound that promised healing through connection. In the burning sun, workers bent low, pulling, laying, covering, knowing that beneath their hands the future was being woven strand by strand. The plan was bold not only in its scale, but in its timing. For Burkina Faso has walked through fire in recent years. Political upheaval, security struggles, and the long shadows of colonial dependence. Yet in the midst of uncertainty, leaders declared, "We will build, we will connect. We will not remain in the darkness of disconnection." Now picture a mother in a remote village, where once letters took weeks to arrive. Picture a student whose textbooks were older than his father. Picture a farmer who sold his goods at the mercy of middlemen. For them, the promise of a high-speed network was not abstract. It was the chance to study online, to sell in real time, to call a doctor from hundreds of kilometers away. The network was more than wires. It was liberation. The state spoke of inclusion. The ministers spoke of digital sovereignty. And the people began to whisper that perhaps, for the first time, they would not only receive what the world offered, but send their voices back. And yet, every story of light casts a shadow. Because when such a massive project rises in the middle of a fragile land, it is never just about the cables. Who paid for the trenches? Who provided the technology? Whose fingerprints are hidden in the software? At every kilometer laid, the questions grew louder. Was this the proud march of Burkina Faso into the digital age, or was it another chapter of dependence dressed as development? Yes, the cables were buried. Yes, the maps were redrawn with glowing lines of connection. But at the heart of this grand project, one storm refused to calm. Who truly holds the keys to this network of light? When the last cables were lowered into the ground and the trenches were sealed, the people of Burkina Faso waited. They waited for the signal bars on their phones to rise. They waited for the promise of speed, of connection, of opportunity. But while the dust settled on the fields, another storm was gathering. And this storm was not of sand, but of suspicion. From the villages to the capital, from Ouagadougou to the farthest borders, questions began to ripple through the air. Who controls this? Who owns the flow of data that now pulses beneath our feet? It did not take long for the whispers to reach the headlines. Foreign journalists pointed to the involvement of Chinese contractors. Analysts warned that this might not just be a network, but a net, a digital web that could entangle a nation. They called it part of the Digital Silk Road, a project by Beijing to extend influence across Africa. And suddenly, the light buried in the sand was not only a symbol of progress, but a shadow of fear. The West responded with caution. In Washington, policy voices murmured about national security, about surveillance, about how the rise of fibre in Burkina Faso might serve as another strand in the long rope of Chinese influence. European think tanks echoed the same, warning that dependence on external powers could lead to invisible chains, chains made not of iron, but of algorithms and codes. Yet within Burkina itself, the reactions were more complex. The youth saw hope. They imagined new businesses, online education, and the ability to speak with the world without delay. For them, the network was not a chain, but a lifeline. But the elders, the teachers, the guardians of memory, they were more cautious. They remembered the promises made in the past by colonizers. They remembered roads built not for the people, but for the extraction of resources. They remembered railways that carried away riches while leaving the land barren. And so, they asked, is this fiber optic project truly ours, or is it another road leading out, another artery bleeding wealth to foreign masters? Even within the government halls, there was unease. Some celebrated the project as a mark of sovereignty, while others quietly feared the hidden clauses in contracts written in distant capitals. For every kilometer of cable laid, another kilometer of doubt was spun in the minds of the people. And yet amid the doubts, there was pride too. Pride that Burkina Faso, so often forgotten, was suddenly being spoken of in the same breath as global powers. Pride that their landlocked nation, often dismissed as marginal, was becoming a node in the world's digital bloodstream. The tension rose like the desert heat. Hopes clashed with fears, and the air grew thick with the weight of uncertainty. On one hand, opportunity gleamed like a mirage. On the other, control seemed to slip further away as invisible hands reached through wires and switches. It was in this moment of confusion, when the people did not know whether to rejoice or to tremble, that a voice was heard. The voice of a man whose rise had already defied expectations, a man who had spoken before with the tone of defiance, calling his people to stand tall against the pressures of old powers. His name was Ibrahim Traoré, and the world leaned closer. What would he say about this great network? Would he admit foreign control? Would he remain silent, allowing speculation to grow? Or would he, as he had done before, speak words that could shift the hearts of his people and shake the halls of the powerful? The crowd gathered. The microphones were placed. The silence deepened. And then Ibrahim Traoré spoke. The hall was silent, though the air was heavy with expectation. Soldiers stood at attention, ministers leaned forward, and citizens pressed close to their radios and screens. For weeks, rumors had swirled like desert winds. For weeks, questions had been asked, but not answered. And now, all waited for one man to speak. Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader whose rise had startled even seasoned observers, stood before his nation. His uniform bore the dust of the Sahel. His words carried the weight of a people hungry for dignity. And when his voice broke the silence, it did not falter. He declared that the 50,000 kilometers of fiber optic cable, those strands of light running beneath the sand, would not be handed to foreign powers. He declared that Burkina Faso itself would guard, manage, and command its own digital future. It was a promise, yes, but more than that, it was a declaration of independence reborn. "We will not allow others to dictate our path," he said, his eyes fierce. "This network belongs to Burkina Faso, and it will be controlled by Burkina Faso." It was not just a statement of ownership. It was a challenge to the very structure of global power. For when a nation so small, so often dismissed, stands and proclaims sovereignty, it unsettles the giants who assume control is theirs by default. The crowd erupted. For the young, it was a moment of pride, a chance to believe that their landlocked nation could stand in the same league as others. For the elders, it was a reminder that the struggle for freedom never ends. It only changes form, from colonial armies to digital cables, from rifles to servers. But promises carry consequences. The international community listened closely. Some scoffed, whispering that Burkina Faso lacked the engineers, the resources, the infrastructure to sustain such independence. Others grew wary, fearing that Traoré's words might inspire a wave of defiance across Africa, where nations too long tethered to foreign powers might begin to demand digital sovereignty of their own. Inside the nation, debates ignited. Supporters hailed Traoré as a defender of dignity, a leader who would not bow. Critics asked, how can a country struggling with security and economy manage such a vast and fragile system alone? Could patriotism replace technical expertise? Could passion guard against cyber threats? And so, the consequences of that speech spread like ripples on water. In one moment, Traoré had strengthened the soul of his people, but in the same breath, he had invited skepticism, challenge, and even confrontation from abroad. Still, history teaches us this. Nations are not built by certainty alone. They are built by conviction, by words spoken with courage, when silence would have been easier. The cables beneath the sand no longer lay quiet. They pulsed with a new energy, the energy of a people who believed, at least for that moment, that they would not be passive passengers on the road of globalization. They would be drivers, and yet, belief must face reality. Can Burkina Faso, with its limited resources, truly secure and maintain this grand network? Can one speech transform destiny, or will it echo as an unfulfilled dream? And so I ask you, dear listener, do you believe Burkina Faso can truly hold this network in its own hands? Or is the promise of sovereignty in the digital age too heavy a burden for one nation to carry? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. While the people of Burkina Faso cheered their leader's words, the world watched with narrowed eyes. In Washington, the speech was replayed, analyzed, and dissected. Policymakers spoke behind closed doors, weighing the meaning of Traoré's defiance. For America, this was not just about fiber optics. It was about influence, about who would shape the future of Africa's digital landscape. The United States had long worried about China's growing role on the continent. Every cable laid, every tower built, seemed to them another strand in a web of dependency spun from Beijing. So when Traoré declared sovereignty, voices in the West questioned, was this genuine independence, or merely independence dressed in rhetoric, with hidden ties still binding the nation to foreign contractors? Europe, too, looked on with mixed feelings. Some leaders praised the spirit of ownership, calling Burkina Faso's stand a step toward African self-determination. Others warned quietly that without robust institutions, the promise of sovereignty could collapse under its own weight. Across Africa, however, the reaction was different. In capitals from Bamako to Addis Ababa, officials and citizens alike felt a spark of inspiration. If Burkina Faso, small and besieged by challenges, could speak of digital sovereignty with such confidence, why not them? Why should not Africa itself control the flow of its data, its voices, its future? The international press painted contrasting portraits. Some described Traoré as a symbol of youthful defiance, a leader daring to claim what others had surrendered. Others portrayed him as reckless, risking isolation in the name of pride. And through it all, the cables beneath the Sahel sand carried silent pulses of light, messages of hope, warnings of danger, echoes of a continent still searching for its rightful place in the 21st century. But here is the truth. The world can comment. The world can applaud. The world can criticize. Yet no foreign voice can decide the destiny of Burkina Faso. That choice, that burden, that gift rests in the hands of its people. The question now is not what America thinks, nor what Europe fears, but this: what path will Burkina Faso choose to walk in the years to come? The cables are buried. The speeches have been made. The world has taken notice. But the real journey for Burkina Faso does not lie in the trenches already dug. It lies in the days, the months, the years to come. For the road ahead is not simple. To maintain 50,000 kilometers of fiber optic cable requires more than courage. It demands engineers trained in cybersecurity, technicians ready to patrol, resources to repair, and institutions strong enough to resist corruption. Without these, the shining promise of independence may dim into disappointment. The threats are real. Hackers lurk beyond borders, seeking to exploit weakness. Economic pressures could push the government to sell control to private interests. Foreign powers, displeased with a young nation's defiance, may find subtle ways to reassert influence through loans, through contracts, through backroom deals. And yet, there is also hope. Hope that this network will not only carry data, but dreams. That children in dusty classrooms will log on to global knowledge. That farmers in distant villages will sell their harvest at fair prices. That doctors will reach patients without delay. If these cables remain in the hands of Burkina Faso, they can become the veins of sovereignty, carrying not only information, but dignity. They can serve as proof that a nation, no matter how small, no matter how overlooked, can stand and say, "We are connected. We are free. We are in control." But the challenge is immense. The question is unavoidable. Can Burkina Faso truly walk this road without stumbling? Can the vision declared by Traoré survive the storms that lie ahead? And so, dear listener, we find ourselves standing at the edge of tomorrow. The desert is quiet now, but beneath its surface runs a silent current of light. Will it carry this nation to freedom? Or will it lead them deeper into the shadows of dependence? The answer lies not in the sand, not in the cables, not even in the speech, but in the choices still to come. The desert has always been a place of silence, a place where time seems to stand still. But now, beneath its surface, a river of light flows unseen. 50,000 kilometers of glass, buried beneath the sand, carrying not only voices and images, but the very soul of a nation reaching toward its future. Burkina Faso has known hardship. It has walked the long road of struggle, from colonial chains to economic uncertainty. Many times it has been told to wait, to depend, to accept less. Yet today, through the voice of Traoré, it declares something different, that its destiny will not be written by others, but by its own hands. The skeptics will continue to speak. They will say the project is too large, the dream too heavy, the resources too scarce. They will compare contracts, analyze figures, and predict failure. But history is not written by predictions. It is written by those who dared to claim what others said could not be theirs. That is why the Ibrahim Traoré speech mattered. It was not only a statement of control over a network, it was a statement of control over identity, dignity, and tomorrow. It told the world that sovereignty is not granted, it is seized, defended, and lived. And so the question is not whether Burkina Faso can avoid difficulty, for it surely will face storms. The question is whether its people will walk together with courage, remembering that beneath the desert lies more than cables. Beneath the desert lies the hope of a generation. My friends, the story of these cables is far from over. It has only begun. And as the light pulses beneath the sands of the Sahel, we must ask ourselves, will Burkina Faso's voice shine bright enough to be heard across the world? Or will it be drowned out, as so many voices of small nations have been before? What do you believe? Can Burkina Faso truly keep control of its future, or is the world too strong, too demanding, too relentless? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. And if you want to journey with us through more stories of power, struggle, and hope, make sure to subscribe. Because the story of Traoré and the story of Africa rising is only beginning.